designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and our expert guest today is a good friend and colleague, Tracey Wilson from IPX 1031. For those that don't know, IPX stands for Investment Property Exchange Services Incorporated, and Tracey's helped me on a number of 1031 exchanges in the past. Tracey is from Colorado, and Tracey, say hello to our podcast audience.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here as well. And what we're going to talk about today is opportunity zones. We're going to cover a lot of ground on a topic that has become really a buzzword, a buzz topic in the commercial real estate industry. Anybody that is investing in real estate likes to talk about opportunity zones. So Tracey, let's get things kicked off. What is an opportunity zone, just by definition? Where are they? What do they look like?
So opportunity zones are a brand new creation in the tax code. They were created at the very tail end of 2017 with the new Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. In the actual tax code, it's section 1400 Z1 and 1400 Z2. Z1 talks about opportunity zones themselves, and Z2 talks about opportunity zone funds, which we'll talk about as well today. Basically what they are is this: they are blighted areas, extremely poverty-stricken areas. They are communities or neighborhoods that have been left behind, as it were, in the economic recovery. And to try and improve those neighborhoods, to attract capital to them, they created this little piece in the tax code. And here's the sum total of the entire concept. When you think about households, you, me, our families, and our 401ks or our stock portfolios or anything like that, our unrealized gains, in other words, we haven't yet sold a stock or sold a mutual fund, they're about $2.8 trillion. That's a lot of money. When you look at corporate America, their unrealized gains from their portfolios are about $3.8 trillion. So grand total, you're looking at about $6 trillion of capital. And what they're trying to do is attract a small little portion of that capital and channel it into these opportunity zones to help improve the lives and the neighborhoods of those particular areas. 8,762 opportunity zones in the United States. These opportunity zones are chiseled in granite. They're not going to change. There's not going to be any new ones. They're going to remain in place until 2047. And again, the whole idea is to encourage people, investors, to tap into this money, take the gains from their sale, and put those gains into an opportunity zone and make that area better.
So next question that I have, a good follow-up would be, does someone have to buy or sell a property to have the benefit of an opportunity zone? So say I've got a property placed in a certain geographic area and I already own it. Is it only that I sell it and then the buyer gets the benefit, or do I have a benefit also as the owner? How does that all work?
Sure. So the answer is no. You do not have to own a piece of real estate in the opportunity zone to take advantage of it. Here is the main way to take advantage of or use opportunity zone investing. Sell stocks, sell bonds, sell mutual funds. Of course, you can sell real estate. You can sell partnership interests. You can even sell a business. And then you're allowed to take those gains, and you have 180 days. Now, let me just pause right there. If anybody out there is familiar with real estate, they're going to hear the 180 days, and they're going to think, this is very similar, if not the same thing as a 1031 exchange with its 180 days. It is not. Opportunity zones are not 1031. You don't need a qualified intermediary such as myself. You don't have to have a 45 days to identify. The 180 days to take your gain from the sale of stocks, bonds, real estate, take that and invest it in an opportunity zone for 100, within 180 days is just similar to a 1031 exchange. Let's keep going with that thought process for just a moment. So here you are, you've sold your stocks, you've sold your real estate, and you don't want to do a 1031 exchange. Instead, maybe you would rather do an opportunity zone. You get to take the gain and you are allowed to receive the basis back tax-free. Just invest the gain within that 180 days. And then that's how the opportunity zone works. So what are the tax benefits in doing that? There are three big benefits in investing into an opportunity zone. One, when you take your gain and you invest it into an opportunity zone, you don't have to pay the capital gains taxes. You're allowed to defer it. How long do you get to defer it? Up until 2026. So you have all that time before you have to pay the tax. Tax benefit number two, if you leave your investment in the opportunity zone for 5 years, then, for example, if your gain was $100, $100, just to make the math easy, then 10% of that gain is now forgiven at the end of 5 years. You will only have to pay tax on the $90 out of the 100. So there's a 10% step up in basis. If you leave your investment in the opportunity zone for 7 years, then the basis steps up by 15%. Again, using that more simple math, if you had $100 of deferred gain, now at the end of 7 years, you only have to pay taxes on $85. $15 of it is now tax-free. So again, just to recap so far, the first benefit was you don't have to pay the gains. They're deferred up until 2026. You leave it in there 5 or 7 years, you get a step up in basis of 10 and 15%. And now the third big benefit. Third benefit is, so this community, this opportunity zone area is getting better because everybody's investing in it. So any new appreciation, if you stay in this investment for 10 years, any new investment now becomes completely 100% tax-free. Not the deferred gain, but any new gains.
Wow, that's incredible. So those 3 steps again, you defer your capital gain till 2026. You've got the ability to have this accelerated step up in basis after year 5 or year 7, and then any new gains, so any new profits experienced in that investment will be tax-free, which is incredible. So this is cool stuff. And no wonder a lot of people in real estate are talking about it. I will tell you, it's been quite interesting for me as a commercial real estate practitioner. It took until about August of last year before I heard about it.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. These opportunity zones have had a rather slow start. The couple of reasons. It took the first 3 or 4 months of 2018 for all the governors of each state to certify these opportunity zones. Once they were submitted and given to the U.S. Treasury, then they were certified, and it took them another 3 months. So there were 6 months of 2018 that just went through the process of getting these things set up. One other thing, they are still actually writing parts of this law. We just received what are called proposed regulations on October 18th that gave us answers to a lot of questions that we didn't know originally how the law was worked. There's going to be one more round, we hope, of proposed regs, maybe at the end of April, maybe beginning of May. So slow start, the law is still being written. Nonetheless, it's a pretty neat law, and hopefully it'll revitalize a lot of communities. I wanted to do one more thing. I wanted to sort of answer your initial question that you sort of kicked it off with. What if somebody owns a piece of real estate already in an opportunity zone? So, okay, they own a piece of real estate, they own a fourplex, they own a rental house, whatever it is they own. How is this opportunity zone going to help them, if at all? And the answer is they could sell that piece of real estate, whether they sell it to some Mr. X buyer or they sell it to an opportunity zone fund. They're not going to get any tax benefits other than being able to then take their gains and go invest in maybe that ozone opportunity zone, I call them ozones, or into some other opportunity zone area. So there's nothing sort of magical about owning a piece of real estate. You've probably received a whole bunch of emails from people that are selling property, and their property is sort of jacked up in price because they think that, oh, I'm in an opportunity zone, therefore this is going to be, the prices are going to be bid up. I'm not quite seeing that yet, but you know, hope springs eternal.
Well, I will say from the perspective of a broker, it's just an additional thing to talk about. And it
Oh
does
yeah.
provide folks that are sitting there with a sizable gain. And the thing I love about the opportunity zone, as you describe it, is we're used to, as commercial real estate practitioners, used to talking to people about specifically their like-kind exchanges with real property. They sold an apartment building, or they sold an industrial building, and they're buying some other piece of income generating property. And that was kind of the way of the 1031 exchange. This adds that wrinkle that you can have a profit or a gain in some other type of venture and bring it into this opportunity zone. And I love the idea that it's going to help address some blighted areas. I think that is that's the spirit of it. And that's obviously the thing that you see across the US. I will say in the state of Colorado, some of the opportunity zones that I have personally seen are areas that aren't so blighted, and are some areas that, yes, may need improvement, but they're not completely down in the dumps. And so I think that people can be real selective about the areas that they pick that are within the opportunity zone and still find a great property, a great piece of property that has some good long-term value. It's not like you're buying the worst piece of real estate. I do know that there are other areas that are going to be more specific to those blighted areas, but I just found that to be very interesting in Colorado as I was looking at the maps. And the maps are public information. It's publicly available. You can Google search those. So that just was very interesting to me. So now the next question I have, Tracey, is this begs the question. So you're in the 1031 exchange world, and I know you also do a lot of presenting. So how does this topic relate to you? And how, I know
Sure.
as an expert in education, you have a lot of people asking this, but I'm curious to hear why this is one of those things that IPX is really championing the cause, and why you're having discussions with people like myself about it.
You bet. So the best way to answer that is for me to go through one more aspect of opportunity zones to be more clear. So knowing about opportunity zones, again, you're right. You can go onto the web. You can find several different interactive links to maps that'll take you to anywhere in the country, and you can drill right down and look at any specific area when you find an opportunity zone. But here is the crucial next step. So again, somebody sells something, stocks, bonds, real estate, which is in and of itself an advantage over a 1031 exchange, because 1031s are only for the sale of real estate or real property. But once you take those gains and you invest them within 180 days, you cannot actually take the gain and go pick out a spot for an opportunity zone itself. You have to invest in an opportunity zone fund. And these funds are being formed hundreds, a day. So you need to shop for a fund, and then that fund will invest in an opportunity zone. So having said that, let's talk about, or do a little compare and contrast with 1031s versus an opportunity zone. So when you do a 1031 exchange, again, you're selling real property, and you've got 180 days to go buy some other investment real property. But with and here's the other point to make. If you sell something for 800 grand and you originally bought it for, say, 300,000, your gain, give or take, is $500,000. So you have to reinvest into the new property, both the gain and the basis, or your principal. You've got to invest both. Let me just pause a second, because a lot of people, even though they're familiar with real estate and 1031s, they always ask the question, well, how come? Why can't I get my own principal back out of the sale? Because the IRS says, hey, if you take your principal, the first dollars that come out of that sale are always considered to be capital gains, not the return of your basis. Okay, so you sell in for 800,000, gain and the basis both have to be reinvested. But with an opportunity zone, you get the basis returned to you tax-free. That's a significant advantage. And then you only have to reinvest the gain into the opportunity zone fund. There are some other problems, though, with opportunity zones. All is not completely perfect. When you do a 1031 exchange, you can exchange and do another one and do another one until, someday when you die. And then a very unique thing happens. It's called a step up in basis. All of the gains, every time you do a 1031, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The day you die, all those gains disappear. There's a step up in basis and all the capital gains disappear. Your heirs, your children, whoever it is that gets the property, they'll get it and they don't have to pay the capital gains taxes because there are no capital gains. Let's go to opportunity zones. Again, what you're selling are stocks or bonds or real estate or a business, and you're taking the gain. And you would think, okay, I'm in an opportunity zone. What if I should die over the next 5 years or 7 years or over that 10-year time frame where I get some of the returns tax-free? Well, isn't there a step up in basis because these are gains? No. They actually wrote into the law that the gains become income and receipt of a decedent. In other words, those gains turn into regular income. Moral to the story: if you're going to invest in opportunity zones, don't plan on dying anytime soon. Otherwise, it'd be all taxable income.
Well, and that's an important distinction, because for a lot of estate planning, people make those types of comments that you said about the 1031 exchange. I'll just wait until I pass on, step up in basis. Therefore, my heirs will have a benefit, of course, by them not selling. In the case of the opportunity zone, like you said, you do not want to have a situation where you're then being taxed at ordinary income, which is much, much higher than long-term capital gains. So that's a very important distinction. Opportunity zones, I think, again, a buzz terminology in our industry at this point. I think that the cool thing about it is that real estate, and I know you do a lot of real estate 101 courses. I've done some as well. And one of the bigger things we always talk about is a benefit to investing in real estate is that it does come with some tax advantages. Those tax advantages are always changing. They change depending on who's in the administration in our government, but then they also change just based on things evolving. And so if you're listening to this and it's not the year 2019, you might want to check and make sure that things are correct in the time that you're listening to them, because this podcast will live on far past the time that we record it. The other thing to think about too is you need to be talking to a professional. So Tracey, what are some go-to pieces of advice that you give to real estate investors that interact with you as far as tax and legal advice, and just how much information can you give on the 1031 exchange side as a professional? And then how much do you say then, hey, talk to your tax professional, talk to your tax attorney in some cases? Where do you kind of start and end? And then where do you then say, hey, now you need to talk to someone that's got a higher level?
Yeah, in fact, I remembered a comment that you made 2 or 3 minutes ago saying, why is IPX championing this? You're sort of surprised. Actually, we're not actually championing opportunity zones. I still think, our firm still thinks that 1031 exchanges are, for most people that are selling real estate, a superior tax deferred methodology. But if you're selling other appreciated assets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, a business, then opportunity zones might indeed be a better way to go. I mean, you cannot do a 1031 exchange on the sale of IBM stock or your Amazon stock. That doesn't happen. Having said that, where do we fit in? I think that I would be a good place to start in terms of advice, in terms of what are the basics, what are the rules, what are the tax ramifications. But beyond that, they're going to need to talk to their financial advisors, or if they're trying to start an opportunity zone fund themselves, they need to seek very good, competent counsel in terms of whether it's a partnership or a corporation interest. That's one other thing I want to sort of step off on, if it's all right with you. So we talked about opportunity zones themselves, these low-income communities with high poverty rates, high unemployment rates, even though there might be a spot or two that are in not quite as blighted neighborhood. But I need to shift to what an opportunity zone fund looks like and what some of its investments are. So an opportunity zone fund, again, you have to invest your gain into that fund. That fund can take the shape of 3 different types of format. It can be a corporation that's been formed, it can be a partnership that's been formed, or it can be an LLC that's been formed, as long as that LLC taxes itself or elects to tax itself as a corporation or as a partnership. What did that mean, bottom line, legalese? It means no single-membered LLC is going to actually be an ozone fund, but corporation partnerships can. So what can they invest in? Those funds can invest in property, and has been put into use after the fund was certified by the Treasury. And these funds are certified every 6 months using a form 8996. And if they buy an existing piece of property, let's say they buy some land in a dilapidated warehouse or industrial property, they're going to have to improve that property by the value of just the building, not including the land. Let me use a simple example. Let's say there's a warehouse and land and the total value is $1.5 million. The land itself is $500,000. The building itself is worth $1 million. Again, it's run down. It's in this tough, blighted neighborhood. If the Opportunity Zone invests in that property, they have 30 months, 31 months, including a safe harbor for working capital. So they have 30 months to improve that property by the value of the building alone. So if the building's $1 million in my story, they're going to have to improve it by another $1 million within that time frame for it to qualify for Opportunity Zone Fund purposes. Did all that sort of make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, which means that this is all set up to obviously heavily improve the existing property. And
Yeah.
that's a big lift. If you're buying something that's got a value of $1 million and you're having to put in $1 million within less than 3 years, I mean, that's the way I heard it. And that's a big deal. And I think probably something that people are probably not thinking about as much as they're contemplating this being a real advantageous situation. So
you bet. So developers really love Opportunity Zones. The other thing you mentioned just a minute ago was, as a traditional real estate investor, you may own a duplex, you rent it out, maybe you have a 6-unit apartment complex, something like that. One of the big tax benefits that you get is depreciation as an expense. Every year you get to write that depreciation off. Now, of course, when you sell that investment piece of real estate, the depreciation is recaptured unless you do a 1031 exchange. Is now a good time to mention my phone number, Kyle? I'm just teasing. The problem with Opportunity Zone funds, though, is this. So you invest in this Opportunity Zone, they improve the property, they've done it inside that 30-month window. Are the investors now going to enjoy some of that tax benefit, like the depreciation expense? The answer is we don't know. I can sort of guess. If the fund is organized as a corporate entity, then I doubt if they're going to get depreciation, because depreciation is taken as an expense at the corporate level. If that fund is organized as a partnership, then maybe the investors might receive depreciation on their K1s. But again, we just don't have good, solid answers quite yet.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing about anything that's new in the tax code, especially something like this, is that there are trials, if you will, audits and things of that sort that will start to prove out what is safe harbor and what's going to be allowed. And that, if you look at something that's more tried and true, like the 1031 exchange, you say, hey, there's a lot more just precedent as to what is and what isn't allowed. So let's talk about that. And I will say to our audience, a lot of times we have a pretty specific structure to our interviews, and we kind of go through a couple of questions that I typically go through. I wanted to dive right into the Opportunity Zone piece because I work with investors all the time, and it's something that we get as questions in our business quite often. So I wanted to get right to the heart, get really tactical. But let's back up for a second. And Tracey, let's talk about your career as a real estate professional. Most of the interviews I do are with realtors or people that are on the brokerage side of the business. But 1031 exchanges, I look at that as very much a part of the real estate profession. And what got you into this industry? And then let's also talk about your heart of a teacher, because I love seeing your presentations. For those that are listening, you can tell Tracey's got a lot of enthusiasm and voice inflection. So let's talk about how you got into the industry, but then also some of the presentations and what really excites you about real estate.
Sure. I actually spent many years at Merrill Lynch on the capital markets, mergers and acquisitions group. Before that, with Credit Suisse, doing fixed income trading, sales, and even an economist for the risk controlled arbitrage group. And it was only around 2003 that I got into this business of doing tax deferred 1031 exchanges. For the first 6 or 7 of those years, I actually had another firm, helped sell it, and now I've been on board with IPX since 2009. And we cover the states of Colorado, Wyoming, Utah. So I love teaching. I've taught at Regis, both at the undergrad and graduate levels. Been able to teach a couple of times at DU. So I very much do it, and I do it also as a part of this job. Presentations are a way that we get out there to the real estate brokerage community, both residential as well as commercial brokerages. Also do presentations for attorneys. I'm approved by the bar to give CLE credit, and to accountants. My classes are also certified for CPE credit. So all that sort of information aside, how about if we do dive into 1031s just a little bit?
I'd love it. That was going to be my next question.
You bet. Show some strategies how we can use 1031s and make them even better because of opportunity zones. So the basics on a 1031. You're going to sell a piece of real estate. Most people don't realize that when they sell their rental house, their vacation home, they sell that fourplex, they sell a commercial office building, whatever it is that they're selling. This is not true for their personal primary residence. This is investment real estate only. They're going to get hit with capital gains taxes that are about 30%. Now, anybody listening to this says, wow, that's not right. I mean, capital gains are only 15%. Well, for people in higher income brackets, it could be as high as 20%. But what a lot of people forget is that the depreciation taken on the property is its own separate capital gain. And it gets taxed no matter what your income level is at 25%. So basically we have the gain because the property has gone up in value. You also have gain because the property, accounting wise, has been going down in value. So both of these chunks of capital gain, 15 and 20% tax, 25% tax, both of these gains will also get taxed by the Affordable Care Act, 3.8% above certain income thresholds. And both of these dollar amounts or chunks of capital gain get taxed by the state of Colorado, 4.63%. So here you are, just to recap, you got 15 and 20%, 25% recapture, 3.8% affordable care, 4.63% state. You know, you add all that up, the way those taxes work, they sort of blend together. The effective or average blended rate almost always is about 30%. So 1031 exchange allows you to sell that property, then you get 180 days to go buy another property, roll all those gains over, and you do not have to pay the 30% or more of capital gains taxes. That's the whole thrust of a 1031 exchange.
So Tracey, the thing that I have happen often is that investors will come to me and they'll say, you know, I want to do a 1031 exchange, but then they'll oftentimes get a little bit tripped up between what a forward exchange is, which is the most common, at least in my viewpoint, and then a reverse exchange, how they're different, but then also how they're similar. So let's talk about why someone would consider a reverse exchange versus a forward exchange, and then also some of the cost structure between those two exchanges.
You bet. So you're right. In today's market, when someone thinks about starting or wants to start a 1031 exchange, their biggest challenge is going to be trying to find that next replacement property. The inventory is very low, supply is limited, prices have really gone up. So would it be rather nice if you could buy the new property first before you got the old one even sold and do your exchange that way? Well, let's just go there mentally for a moment. Let's say a client, an investor does that. They buy their new replacement property, you know, congratulations, they now own it, but they're still entitled to the old property because it's not yet sold. And the IRS says, oh, you're entitled to both. You cannot do an exchange between them. There's no room to transfer the gains between them. So they literally created this little bit of fiction in the tax code called a reverse 1031 exchange. And instead of the client going out there and buying their new replacement property, it is actually going to be us, the qualified intermediary. IPX must form a special purpose entity that the IRS wants us to use. That entity will step into the shoes of the client, and we will be the ones that will actually buy. We will close on the purchase of the client's new replacement property. Then the client just goes on with their business. They eventually sell their old property. Once they get it sold, then all we do is transfer title from us, from that entity, to the client, and that finishes their reverse exchange. So they're more complex. I mean, A regular forward exchange, for all practical purposes, is about $950, give or take. But a reverse exchange, with its complexity with the IRS, they're about $4,500, give or take. So did all that help? There one more aspect to the reverse exchange. When we buy the client's new property, it's called parking title. We're only going to own it for a little bit. It's a temporary form of ownership. So where do we get the money to buy the client's new property? We're not allowed to use our own money. The client has to give us the money. Well, some clients have enough cash or liquidity that they can simply loan us the money. Well, let's say they do that. We secure them with a promissory note. Once they get their old property sold, then those proceeds are used to pay down or pay off that note. Not a lot of clients, though, have that much liquidity. Meaning that now they're going to have to go talk to a lender. Let me tell you, the traditional lenders are not going to understand or allow this to go through their underwriting. I have a short list of 5, 6, 7 lenders that understand the reverse 1031 exchange process.
Yeah, it's really complicated. And like you said, you either have to have a big old bucket of capital somewhere else or get a bridge loan. And it is very, very complicated. I have only seen it, I would say actually less than a handful of times. I've seen it attempted, and very few times do I see it actually go all the way through. What I see
in today's market, Kyle, the reason we're seeing a huge increase in reverse exchanges. In the old days, in a normal real estate market, it might have been perhaps 1 out of 10 as a reverse exchange. I'd say a good 1 out of 4, maybe 1 out of 5 are reverse exchanges today. Huge increase. And again, it's because it's hard to find replacement property, and it's better to do it in reverse order.
Well, and that's fascinating. And I would say that I probably will start to see that as appreciation is becoming much more common. And then obviously you've got developers and some people that may have the resources to do a reverse exchange. For someone who's never done a 1031 exchange and is looking at doing the straightforward, simple, and I say simple in air quotes, but simple forward exchange, what does that look like from the time that they list a property with me and we get the property under contract? I'm assuming that there's some documents that they're going to have to assign, and I know that because I've been a part of the process. What does closing look like for that person? And then let's talk about 45 days versus 180 days, and then purchasing their property, what that looks like as well.
Okay, sort of from beginning to end. Does it affect the person that owns a property, the investor, the seller? Does it affect them? Does it affect you, the broker? The answer is not really. You don't have to change your real estate sales contract. You don't have to do any other provisions. Just go about the normal real estate sales process. However, once you are under contract to sell, that's when you should contact us. At that point in time, that's when we begin to work with the title insurance company, the escrow, that's going to be doing the closing 20, 30, 40 days down the road, 60 days down the road. Do you have to have language in the real estate sales contract? Eventually, yes. You don't have to have it in there right away. So again, it doesn't interfere with your business as a broker. Do you have to have 1031 language or notification in the MLS listing or the listing agreement? No, you don't have to. All right, so now we've gotten to the point where, again, client is under contract. They've not yet gotten to closing. They've called us, or you call us on their behalf, say, hey, we're going to use the XYZ title company, and that's where we're going to close. That's when we prepare the documents. Those docs have to be done and in place at or before the closing of the sale. The closing of the sale starts the exchange. There are 2 timelines that are involved. They got 45 days from the closing of the sale to identify the properties that they maybe want to go buy or exchange into. The other timeline, the other deadline, starts on the same day, the day they close on that sale. They get 180 days to actually close on the purchase of 1 or more of those properties that they identified. And now we're towards the end of the exchange and they're ready to close on their replacement property. So by the way, it is okay to sell 1 property and buy 2 or 3 multiple properties. The opposite is also true. Some people will sell 2 or 3 properties and mush together all of those proceeds to go buy 1 bigger, larger replacement property. Any combination that can be done in a 1031 exchange. All right, now we're at the closing of the purchase of the replacement property. That's where all those gains from the old property are going to be rolled over into. Again, we have to have a whole new set of documents that the IRS wants. They have to be in place at or before the purchase closing. So you just got to let us know, hey, this is the title company we're going to use, ABC, and we'll get the docs there for them. We try and make it very easy. We take it right off of the client's shoulders and make your life easier too, Kyle.
Well, and I've worked with Tracey and his coworker, Danita, and they do a great job of making the process very straightforward. I was going to say simple, but it's not simple. It is straightforward, though, and you do help hold everyone's hand through the process, make sure that we all get to the closing and do so without a whole lot of hiccups. Now, I always ask this question with a little bit of tongue in cheek to 1031 folks, and I am not at all trying to make your life more stressful, but what is the last opportunity for someone to ask you to do a 1031 exchange? And what's the shortest amount of time that you've had maybe historically between someone making a call and you actually implementing an exchange?
That's actually a pretty good question. The shortest amount of time is when somebody's sitting there at the closing table and it sort of dawns on them, I think I'm going to have to pay taxes. So I would just tell either the broker or the client, just put the closing on pause. Just hold on for 10 or 15 minutes. We can actually get documents there 15 minutes, half an hour. Our record, I think, was about 12 minutes at one time. But I always tell people, let's not wait until the day of closing. You call me or get a hold of me long before, and at least by the time that you go under contract, that's when you ought to get a hold of us. And then we'll take care of everything for you.
Yeah, ideally, in my experience, it's been you deliver a contract to whichever title company it is, and then you're sending it at the same time to the 1031 exchange and making sure that IPX is taking care of you. Okay, so one final question before we adjourn. This is more of a personal question. You've had an illustrious career in several different industries as it relates to investing. I didn't know about the investment banking side of things. It's very cool, and we'll have to talk about that offline because my wife has quite a bit of experience in that part of the industry as well. But this is my favorite question for the end, Tracey. It is this dear younger me question. It's the advice you wish you knew when you were 22. Now, I will say that there are a lot of younger folks in their early 20s, maybe mid 20s listening to this. And as you're sitting here, having been an owner of a company at one point, obviously working in two different industries that you mentioned, what's some advice that you give to folks that are interested in real estate investing or that are interested just in the real estate industry now that you've been in it for quite some time? What's some advice you'd give to someone in their 20s?
Start saving. Have a savings account. You might have the beginnings of a 401k. You might have, maybe you own your own business or you're a broker and you're taking your commissions, your income, you're an investor. You need to have a completely separate nest egg for savings. You need to probably divide that savings up into two parts: savings for emergencies and savings for later on to do things like invest in real estate. So start saving. I don't know, that sounds rather old-fashioned. It sounds completely abnormally simple, but it's really very true.
Well, that's God and grandma's way of making sure that you can become wealthy, right? You know.
And I am neither God nor grandma.
But wait for, rainy day fund, right? That's number one. And a good rule of thumb, I've gone through a bunch of different classes. A great class for just good financial planning for anybody is called Financial Peace University. I was a facilitator of that class. It's not affiliated at all with IPX or with the 1031 exchange process, but they talk about in that class that each person should have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. And that makes sense, of what your living expenses are. Stop living paycheck to paycheck. And there's a process for doing that. So I love that advice. And then I agree, you've got your rainy day fund, your emergency fund, that's going to sit in one account, and then have this other account for investing. And you should always be thinking about both. Okay. So a couple of pieces of contact information. So I know that there's going to be a ton of questions, and Tracey does get paid to help people with 1031 exchanges. That's his core business. You can find IPX at www.ipx1031.com. And then also Tracey can be contacted at Tracey, TRACEY.Wilson, WILSON at IPX.1031.com. Now I noticed that on this business card is a little different. Is there a dot in between IPX and 1031, Tracey?
No.
There is not.
It's
Okay.
IPX1031.
Gotcha. And you'll
Yep.
find it. You can obviously do a Google search. Like Tracey said, he is focused in the state of Colorado, which is where we are recording our podcast, but also Utah and Wyoming. And I'm sure that he could refer you to someone if you're out of those states. And Tracey, I really do appreciate your time. For those of you that have been listening to the podcast for a long time, Tracey and I really have met in person. We've done 1031 exchanges. He was literally at our office last week saying hello. And I have worked with Tracey, and I'm endorsing them because I have worked with IPX. So I appreciate you helping my clients out.
Two last things, Kyle.
Sure.
One, IPX is a nationwide firm. We're probably one of the remaining last few firms that are nationwide with people on the ground in all 50 states. So you can do an exchange anywhere amongst any state. The other thing is there is a way or a mechanism that if you start a 1031 exchange, because you can't find the property and your exchange is going to fail, don't pay those 30% capital gains. Keep talking to us, because there is a way that you can actually take the exchange funds and go do an opportunity zone. So that's one thing we didn't talk about, but opportunity zones can be a rescue mechanism, a 1031 fallback of sorts.
Well, in the entertainment business, they call that a great teaser. That's a great reason for you to get in touch with Tracey. So Tracey, if they want to call you direct, what's a good phone number for you?
My cell phone, which is on almost 24/7 at 303-883-5846. The office number is 720-344-4843.
I love it. Well, as I love to remind people at the end of every show, if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review it. If you're on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star review is a big appreciation for me, for our podcast producer, Kayla Davis, for Tracey Wilson, the folks that are on this. We're up to 24 5-star reviews now. I saw that. I was actually checking it today before we started recording. So thank you for doing that.
Thank
Tracey
you.
Wilson, thank you so much for your time today. And as I love to say, I will see you around the neighborhood.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.